On to the biggest debate in WrestleMania history, and that is WrestleMania 19 better than 17 or not? Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another edition of WrestleMania Review Series, and this time we are looking at WrestleMania 19. We went from WWF to WWE. This is the first ever WWE branded WrestleMania ever, and it was an incredible show. Um, there is not really anything horrible on the show. Every match delivered. When people talk about the bad things about WrestleMania 19, it's usually nitpicky stuff, like the fact that this show actually didn't sell as much as 18 and 17, given that up to this point we were done with the Attitude Era. We were basically saying goodbye to that era of our lives. While you had your legends like Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, all of those guys that were already established for the past decades, we had one job with this WrestleMania, and that is get you ready for a new era, a new age of professional wrestling. This was the way things were gonna go after the Attitude Era. We were already getting a precursor to the Ruthless Aggression Era. We already were establishing your new top guys, but they weren't quite there yet. And honestly, with that, I'm really happy with this show. Whether or not this was better than 17, we'll get to that in the end. But let's just talk about it. We had one of the greatest video packages to open the show, and this was the one time where I'm like, this is the start of when WrestleMania really felt epic, like it was a Super Bowl or something to that extent. That was how special that video package was for WrestleMania 19, where it had every wrestler kind of basically talk about what WrestleMania means to them. And you could say, because the slogan of this show was Dare to Dream, and it honestly made me cry, if I'm being honest. That's how emotionally impactful this show started. But onto the wrestling side of things, and we kick off the night with Rey Mysterio and Matt Hardy for the Cruiserweight Championship. This was V1 Matt Hardy. This was probably my favorite version of Matt Hardy. Maybe I'm gonna be honest, I think I liked it a little bit more than Broken Matt Hardy, just because this was Matt Hardy around this time was very funny and very entertaining. Not to say that Broken wasn't, but I don't know, this was just pretty simple. And plus, that theme song was killer. Oh yeah, dan, dan, dan. And then Rey Mysterio, who, if you all know, I'm from San Diego. Rey Mysterio is practically our hometown hero. We don't have that many in San Diego, if I'm being honest, but Rey Mysterio is a legend. This is when he started dressing like comic book characters. He was dressed like Daredevil. I will say this, Rey Mysterio's mask was super distracting. It looked like it didn't even fit him. When I got to this match, it was like, it's very clear that they wanted both these stars on the show. Unfortunately, these guys only got 4 minutes. And with those 4 minutes, they carried those 4 minutes. They made it work. They had Shannon Moore involved, who was on Matt Hardy's corner, which is the reason why Matt Hardy won in the first place. Man, they were throwing in moves left and right. It was just like adrenaline from top to bottom. And then the finish where Rey Mysterio gets stuck under the ropes. Matt Hardy rolls him up, holds onto the ropes, 1, 2, 3, and Matt Hardy is still your cruiserweight champion. It was very good to continue this feud, and this was a time where Rey Mysterio was very famous for having really short matches and making the most out of it with those short minutes that he had at any pay-per-view, if I'm being honest. Moving on to Undertaker versus the Big Show and A-Train. This is famous for initially being Undertaker and Nathan Jones versus Big Show and A-Train. Then they realized Nathan Jones is a terrible wrestler, and Undertaker, Big Show, and A-Train all knew that. So They basically beat him up backstage, and this became a 2-on-1 handicap match. The best part of this entire match was that we finally got Undertaker to come out to Limp Bizkit's Rolling with Fred Durst and the whole band of Limp Bizkit, bunch of chicks dancing. It was a badass entrance, an American badass entrance. See what I did there? The match itself was not that good. It was just um, Undertaker just throwing two big men from spot to spot. Nathan Jones helps Undertaker at the end, and then A Train gets pinned. Undertaker wins. Cool moment for him. This was basically just to have Undertaker on the card. And it was very clear from the very beginning that Nathan Jones was never going to make it to this match. Rightfully so. He was terrible. At this point, it was very clear that the American Badass was going nowhere, so they were slowly fading him out and bringing back the Dead Man. So, very happy that at least it leads to that. Women's Championship Triple Threat match. We have Victoria, Jazz, and Trish Stratus. This match was good. This was around the time where they started taking women's wrestling serious. This is where Trish Stratus started being more seen as a wrestler and not just a hot body. So I was very happy that we acknowledge that Trish Stratus can be gorgeous, but at the same time be a talented wrestler, which is what made her a legend. And yeah, I really enjoyed this match. Kudos to this match, and kudos to everybody involved, even Steven Richards, who was annoying at some points, but his job was to be annoying. We have another triple threat match on the way. This time in the tag team division. Team Angle, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas versus Chris Benoit and Rhino versus Eddie and Chavo, Los Guerreros. This was a solid, good match. It was basically put together simply for the fact that, if you guys don't know the story, Kurt Angle had an injured neck. He was going to go under surgery and he was going to miss out WrestleMania. And then the rumored match was that we were going to do Brock Lesnar and Chris Benoit for the vacant WWE Championship, or Brock Lesnar was going to beat Kurt Angle on SmackDown. Then it was going to be Benoit and Lesnar on the card with Brock walking in as champion. Eventually, Kurt Angle was eligible to compete at WrestleMania. He was just going to pull through and have this match, which basically told you that Kurt Angle was going to lose at the end. But so because Kurt Angle was eligible to compete, we still wanted Benoit on the show, so why not put him in the tag team division? Kind of crazy that we have never gotten the chance to see all 6 members of the SmackDown 6 on the show. Like, this is the closest we ever got to it. Unfortunately, Edge got injured beforehand, and it unfortunately, yeah, we've never got to see the SmackDown 6 all in one card at WrestleMania. But, you can't be too mad because, we had 2 of them right here, Eddie and Chris, who eventually go on to have an amazing match for the United States Championship, the inaugural United States Championship. And it was very fitting that they had this match for what it was, and it was very clear that they still wanted Team Angle to be tag team champions, so I can't really fault this for what it was. It was very enjoyable, and it really showed you how great Eddie and Benoit are, and we'll get to them next year when they win the world titles. But then we move on to the match of the night for me, and that is Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels. So for the first time in 5 years, we get to see Shawn Michaels have a match at WrestleMania. The last time he closed out against Stone Cold Steve Austin and had to retire after that casket match at the Royal Rumble 1998. He does make a comeback in 2002 at SummerSlam. It was supposed to be a one-off, but then it became Shawn Michaels entering the chamber, winning the world title, doing all this other stuff. And Basically, Shawn Michaels at this point was gonna be a full time wrestler. So why not have all the best matches he can, and why not start that with Chris Jericho, a man who was practically the modern day Shawn Michaels. And even when they both came out, like Jericho in the blue, Shawn Michaels in the red, you can tell like their styles were practically similar, but they were unique in their own way. And that was basically what this match was like. Chris Jericho idolizing Shawn Michaels for so long, him saying that he always wanted to be the next Shawn Michaels, but he got tired of being that. He wanted to be the first Chris Jericho. Great story. And ideally, in this scenario, Chris Jericho should have gone over, but I'm happy he didn't because this was Shawn Michaels' first WrestleMania match. And given that Chris Jericho was such a good heel, back in the day, if you hated a heel, you hated a heel. And Chris Jericho was very brutal around this time. He was a hard ass and a piece of crap, and that was his job. He made you hate him, and because of it, I was very happy with the styles. And they didn't need to be a brawl. They just need to be technical. They knew when to be brutal with each other, and they knew how to be technical. There was a part where Shawn Michaels does a front kick to the outside, which in hindsight was kind of dumb because regardless whether he hit it or not, Shawn Michaels gonna fall on his back. Chris Jericho catches him, he flips him. There was this whole aspect of will Shawn Michaels tap out to Chris Jericho? He doesn't, but man, this match was so incredible to watch. One of my favorite Shawn Michaels WrestleMania matches. This is probably the start of when people started referring to Shawn Michaels as Mr. WrestleMania, because up to this point, his best match at WrestleMania was the ladder match with Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10. Honestly, Shawn Michaels' comeback year was mainly all about all these great matches that he has at WrestleMania. Like it was just banger after banger after banger, and this was no different. And I love the ending of Shawn Michaels rolling up Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels having his moment, but then he tries to share it with Jericho. Chris Jericho kicks him in the nuts, and this continues the feud sorta. I really wish they had a one-on-one rematch at Backlash, especially because Backlash 2003 was awful. That's just my personal take. I don't know how you guys feel about Backlash 2003. Not for me. At this point, they took a long break for the next match. We had Limp Bizkit come out to perform a Crack Addict. We had the cat fight with uh, Stacy Keibler, Tori Wilson, and two other girls who were in Playboy um, at a bed in ringside. This was basically your moment of, let's look at hot chicks. They really sold that around this time, especially when you had Tori Wilson, who was basically like the modern day Sable up to this point, which ironically enough, they had a match, a feud, I should say, later down the road. And then eventually we finally get to the first match. This took up like a combined 20 to 25 minutes. I'm not complaining. I like Crack Addict, the song, and I like seeing these girls. But now let's move on to the wrestling yet again. And this time for the World Heavyweight Championship, Triple H versus Booker T. The feud has a lot of controversy. You can add race to a match. You just can't be. I don't know. They kind of went too far with this. Calling Booker T a thug. Um, Triple H giving Booker T money to bring his towel. That wasn't unnecessary. This should have just really been like Booker T trying to win the belt that he carried in WCW. And he was like the last hope of WCW, and because he was the last WCW champion up to that point, before WCW closed their doors, he couldn't really recuperate that same magic, and this would have been the perfect time for Booker T to win. But again, this was the infamous Reign of Terror that people hate. Um, I thought that the match itself was good. It did hurt Booker T in the long run because we never had a follow up. Like, I would have loved for Booker T to get the title at Backlash and then drop it back at Bad Blood and a Hell in a Cell. That would have been cool. And what hurts this match was the finale, which if you watch it on streaming services nowadays, it's not the same. If you have seen this live or know about the stories, you know that Triple H hits a pedigree, sits out for like 30, 38 seconds. He finally goes to pin Booker T 1, 2, 3 after that long pause, which really hurt the match in the long run because it practically buried Booker T. I will say that the match itself was enjoyable for what it was. This was around the time where Ric Flair interfered a lot. And he went over the top so much so that it kind of took away from the match. But regardless, I I thought it was fine. But you can feel the importance of this match, just the amount of care that they had because this was the sixth overall match, and we still had three other mega matches to go. And we start off with Hulk Hogan versus Mr. McMahon, a match 20 years in the making, a street fight where if Hulk Hogan lost, he would have to retire from in ring competition. He doesn't, because he ends up winning this match, and this was just purely entertainment. Um, when I watched this match, correct me if I'm wrong. So Hulk Hogan comes out with like a similar Voodoo Child type of song, the Jimi Hendrix Experience Voodoo Child, and I believe he had the rights to this song at the time, but given how streaming services work, it's more expensive to add the song Voodoo Child. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody watches this and puts it on the comments. Does Hulk Hogan actually come out to Voodoo Child in real life? Just curious out there. Vince McMahon comes out, and without hesitation, the match just starts off. They are fighting, and for two old guys, they knew how to entertain you for as long as they did. You would be convinced that this was gonna headline the show, just giving the story and just build up, because the story basically being that Hulk Hogan was a letdown at the end. People started booing him. The infamous steroid trial, him leaving to WCW, forming the NWO, and almost putting WWE down. Vince McMahon said that he really created WWE, made it what it is today. Basically, it's a fight of who really was the person who helped create WWF slash WWE and made it what it is today. So it was a brilliantly well told story, and I was very hooked from the very start. And it is unfortunate this is Hulk Hogan's last WrestleMania match. But you know what? I'm happy that we were at least entertained. This wasn't a match that you look at and go like, "Oh, these guys still had it." No, this was just pure entertainment, and it was bloody. It was brutal. Chair shots to the head when it was allowed. This spot where Vince McMahon climbs the ladder and jumps onto the announce table, does the leg drop on Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan wouldn't move. There's a part where the Spanish announcer gets hit with a chair and he's bloodied up. There was again good back and forth. Roddy Piper makes a appearance. You would think that like, oh, is he gonna turn on Vince McMahon, who already had beef with them at this point? He also left the WCW, but his hatred for Hulk Hogan was just too much for him to ignore, which was an awesome moment for me, given the fact that I watched the first WrestleMania and now I'm watching this. Was very cool. But again, Hulk Hogan was more of a showman than he was a wrestler, and it shows when Vince McMahon starts punching him in the head, and then he hulks up, brother, and then he gets his moment. There was a part early on the show where a referee is in Vince McMahon's office. That referee comes into play. I believe he's the one who screwed Hogan back in the day. And then he gets his ass kicked. Hulk Hogan does the leg drop. There was a lot of kicks to the nuts in this match, if I'm being honest. A little too many, I will say. But anyways, Hulk Hogan does the leg drop on Vince. 1, 2, 3. Hulk Hogan gets his big moment. And this was, even though not his last match, definitely his last WrestleMania match. And I still can't believe like this is the last one. And it was entertaining, and I really enjoyed it. And honestly, it was one of the matches that I'm gonna remember the most out of this entire show. On to the semi-main event, and you would think that this was gonna be the main event, given that they've main evented uh, two WrestleManias within the past 4 years, and that is Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. The story was written right there. I think up to this point, Stone Cold was gonna hang up the boots very soon. So why not do Rock and Stone Cold one more time? And the story was plain and simple. The Rock has lost to Stone Cold twice. He wants to redeem himself. He wants to beat Stone Cold Steve Austin at a WrestleMania, and he finally does. We had the Hurricane involved, not in this match, but throughout the build. This was still around the time where The Rock would oversell the hell out of that stunner. There's one where like Stone Cold stuns The Rock. He just stands like that. Then he fixes him up, and then he does another stunner. He goes flying off. This was another time where The Rock went Hollywood, where he started focusing more on movies and all these other stuff. This was where The Rock was on his way out, so why not make him a heel, which was a very entertaining heel. He's practically the final boss before the final boss. Um, this was pure gold, and it was the weakest out of the Rock Austin trilogy, but it was still very entertaining. This basically was the end of the Attitude Era. Why not have the top two Attitude Era guys have one more match and then have The Rock finally get that victory that he wanted? Because The Rock was going to be the one that was going to stick around. Not as long as that we thought. He really only had like maybe one more month of the year until he came back to next year, WrestleMania 20. It was very emotional to have a Stone Cold Steve Austin just, just at the end of the match, he has his song played, he walks out, he's thanking the fans. That was basically his way of saying goodbye and thank you for an amazing year. This was really the end of the Attitude Era, and I'm glad that did not main event, because we were on to what was next for this era, the Ruthless Aggression Era, I should say. Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar, and I was so happy that Kurt Angle was able to make it to WrestleMania. It just wouldn't be the same without Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle was the one carrying a lot of the great matches that were at WrestleMania up to this point. And for an injured Kurt Angle, he was moving great. Brock Lesnar was a good heavyweight. This was pure wrestling. And the wrestling was just really good in here. It was the story of Brock Lesnar keeps hitting the F5, but Kurt Angle won't kick out. The ankle lock being reversed. This was a precursor to Suplex City, if I'm being honest. Man, this was a brutal match, and it didn't have blood. It was just pure technical wrestling, and I really enjoy it, especially for Kurt Angle, who can wrestle lightweights and heavyweights. And this was a cool moment. There was a part where Kurt Angle picks up Brock and then he flips him. It was fucking badass. But the moment that people unfortunately remember the most out of this was the botch. Let's talk about it. Up to this point, Brock Lesnar has hit 2 F5s on Kurt Angle. They sold it like no one's ever kicked out of the F5. I don't know if that's true or not. I believe Big Show had kicked out of the F5 up to this point. But anyways, Brock Lesnar runs to the top rope. He's going to hit the shooting star press, which we all know he could do, given his OVW days. And he missed. Kurt Angle was way too far to have that move be landed, but Brock lands on his head. Kurt Angle rolls him up, takes advantage. 1, 2, kick out. Luckily, we needed a new finish. Just do another F5. More brutal F5. 1, 2, 3. Brock Lesnar is your WWE champion. This is basically their way of saying Brock Lesnar is going to be our new top guy in the company. Unfortunately, he wasn't because he leaves the next year. But man, for the time that we had Brock Lesnar in the Ruthless Aggression era, man, he knew how to stay relevant. The guy was just a badass. He was a beast, as we all like to call him. And man, this was the perfect way to showcase that Brock Lesnar was going to be your new top guy. I was so happy that Kurt Angle got to main event a WrestleMania. And yes, it was to put over another guy and the new face of the company, but so what? He got to main event WrestleMania. That's very important, especially when even if you lose the main event of WrestleMania, if you can put over the other guy and make him look good, you've done your job. Now the big question is this WrestleMania better than 17? And for me, it is tough. It is really hard to make that debate. I think really enjoyed a lot of the moments of WrestleMania 17. Don't get me wrong, this one had its moments too, and it was really great. But I don't know, it is hard because 17 is just so good and so epic. Both conveniently enough have Limp Bizkit playing the theme song. Um, it is hard because they are like right there. I will say 17 just because it is more legendary, I would say. And even though this one had the job of basically setting up the rest of the year and the new era, basically, I don't know. I still have more nostalgia feel for 17, if I'm being fair. But again, this show, you just can't take away from it. It is just as good as 17. And that is why I'm giving this show an A+. Um, like I said, it only had the job of basically getting you ready for what is a new era of professional wrestling. Even the worst match, Taker versus Big Show and A-Train, was not that bad. And luckily, we eventually get the Dead Man coming very soon. So I can't really fault it for that. Again, I really enjoyed this show. I like how the show ended too with Brock Lesnar holding the belt, and then on commentary you hear, "We'll see you next year at Madison Square Garden." So I'll close off here by saying, "We'll see you for WrestleMania 20 at Madison Square Garden." Take care, everybody.